Le
It's
CAPSAT.
2025, and the island of Madagascar is echoing with a sound the world didn't expect. The sound of a people who've decided fear has outstayed its welcome. Young voices rise through the night, tired of silence, tired of watching their future slip away. Then something unthinkable happens. The army steps in, but not to crush them. Side by side with the crowds, uniforms blend into the people, and power begins to shift in real time. This is more than a headline, it's a warning shot across the Indian Ocean. Is France's long shadow over Africa finally fading? From Bamako to Niamey, from Ouagadougou to Antananarivo, a new language is being spoken, the language of ownership, dignity, and consequence. Tonight, we break down how a protest became a pivot, how the military crossed the line, and why this moment could redraw the map of influence on the continent. History is shifting again. Welcome to Afro Culture Diary. Before we dive in, make sure you hit like, subscribe, and turn on that bell. Every story here is another page in Africa's diary, written by us, for us. Every revolution begins as a whisper before it becomes a roar. In Madagascar, that whisper started in the universities. Lecture halls turned into meeting grounds, and frustration turned into fuel. A generation that had grown up watching the world change while their own streets stayed the same finally said, enough. It began with the cost of living, then corruption, then the question of who truly controls the island's wealth. Whispers spread through social media, across classrooms, and into the markets where mothers complained that even rice, the soul of every meal, had become a luxury. But what set this moment apart was what came next. As protests filled the capital, soldiers stationed nearby started to listen, not to orders, but to the people. Videos began circulating online, showing soldiers lowering their weapons to shield protesters instead of dispersing them. That moment changed everything. The line between citizen and soldier blurred, and the power balance began to tilt. By the third night, the chants had evolved from "Justice for the Youth" to "Madagascar belongs to us." Crowds swelled into tens of thousands. The images were impossible to ignore, drone shots of the capital glowing under protest fires, soldiers marching not against, but alongside their own people. And somewhere deep in the corridors of foreign embassies, alarm bells began to ring. Because what was happening in Madagascar wasn't just a local protest. It was a spark threatening to ignite a much larger fire across Africa. But in the chaos of chants and courage, one question hung heavier than the smoke above the streets. Would the army stand with the people or turn their guns against them? The answer came before dawn. When the first armored trucks of CAPSAT, Madagascar's elite military unit, rolled toward the presidential palace, the night air shifted from chaos to anticipation. Rumors had already spread through the streets. President Andry Rajoelina was missing from the capital. By the time dawn touched the rooftops of Antananarivo, CAPSAT soldiers had surrounded every key ministry, every broadcast tower, every road leading out of the city. At 7 a.m., national television flickered to life. A calm-voiced captain, flanked by fellow officers, faced the cameras. Behind him, the Malagasy flag rippled under studio lights. We, the CAPSAT, have taken responsibility for the nation's security. The government is dissolved. Power now rests with the people of Madagascar. For a heartbeat, silence ruled the streets, then the city exploded with sound. Crowds poured into Independence Square, waving flags and chanting the soldiers' names. No gunfire, no panic, just thunderous relief. In one coordinated move, the military had ended an era of political paralysis. CAPSAT's trucks became rolling symbols of liberation, not intimidation. Their officers ordered protection for hospitals, radio stations, and public archives, vowing no revenge, only transition. Across Africa, the footage spread like wildfire, soldiers saluting civilians, protesters embracing men in uniform. Across France, officials fell into damage control. Paris called for constitutional order, but everyone knew what that meant: control restored. Yet this time, Africa wasn't listening. From the Sahel to the Cape, leaders and citizens whispered the same sentence: another chain has broken. But celebration always comes with a shadow. Foreign ships loomed quietly off Madagascar's coast, and intelligence briefings hinted that France might not watch this revolution from the sidelines. The shockwave was only beginning. When Madagascar's CAPSAT unit seized power, the tremor traveled far beyond the island. It shook the same palace walls that once protected Andry Rajoelina, the former DJ-turned-mayor who first rose to power in 2009 through another military-backed coup, ironically led by elements of CAPSAT itself. Back then, Paris had offered quick recognition, and France's companies quietly held on to their contracts. For years, that partnership kept Rajoelina's seat secure, even as the cost of living climbed and youth unemployment grew. Now, 16 years later, the same force that crowned him had uncrowned him, and the symbolism was impossible to ignore. Madagascar had become the mirror image of its own past. Only this time, the soldiers weren't marching for a politician, they were marching for the people. Inside France's Foreign Affairs Ministry, aides replayed the broadcast again and again, looking for clues. Who commanded CAPSAT now, and who whispered in their ears? The statement on Malagasy TV carried no names, only a promise of transition and sovereignty. But in Paris, the message was clear. Another ally had slipped away. Across Africa, celebrations flared. In Mali and Burkina Faso, leaders of the Sahel alliance praised Madagascar's bold step toward self-determination. Analysts on Western news channels warned of an African domino effect. But in African streets, the phrase trending was different. The wind has changed. For the youth of Madagascar, this was more than politics. It was poetic justice. The man who once took power through the army had now lost it to the same army, and the people stood beside them both as witnesses and beneficiaries. And as dawn spread across the continent, every capital understood the same unspoken truth. France's era of quiet control was ending, and a new African confidence was taking its first full breath. But power vacuums attract storms. As diplomats fled Antananarivo and foreign navies circled the Indian Ocean, whispers grew louder. Would the new rulers hold their ground, or would old empires strike back? As the dust of celebration settled, the air around Madagascar began to thicken with uncertainty. France called emergency meetings behind closed doors, their spokesman talking of protecting democracy, their ships repositioning quietly along the Indian Ocean. Officially, they were monitoring the situation. Unofficially, they were preparing for containment. But Africa was watching, and this time, Africa was ready. In Bamako, President Goita's government made a statement that rippled like thunder. The sovereignty of one African nation is the sovereignty of all. Burkina Faso's Ibrahim Traoré echoed it days later. If France cannot respect the will of the Malagasy people, it must leave the continent with its illusions. Even Senegal's youth movements, far from the Sahel, adopted new chants. From the desert to the ocean, Africa rises as one. Inside Madagascar, the new leaders knew the stakes. They spoke carefully, balancing defiance with diplomacy. "We are not against nations," one colonel said. "We are against manipulation disguised as partnership." Foreign media painted it as anti-French sentiment. But in Africa, it sounded more like reawakening. Protesters carried both the Malagasy flag and the Pan-African colors. Murals appeared overnight, showing a clenched fist rising from the sea. Under it, the words, "We will not be managed." The symbolism was unmistakable. The message was clear. What began as a protest had evolved into a proclamation that Africa's future would no longer be negotiated behind closed doors. And though France still weighed its options, something irreversible had already happened. The psychological empire had cracked. But in the silence after victory, a deeper question remained. Would Africa stay united once the cameras turned away? That question, and its answer, would define what came next. Every generation inherits a continent. Some inherit borders, others inherit battles. But this generation, Africa's new generation, is inheriting the courage to say no. From the Sahel to the Indian Ocean, from dusty barracks to crowded universities, the same heartbeat echoes. We've waited long enough. Madagascar's story is no longer about one island. It's a mirror, reflecting every African youth who has ever wondered why their future was being negotiated in another language, in another capital, by people who never lived their struggles. And maybe, for the first time in decades, the answer is shifting, not in speeches or sanctions, but in solidarity. Because when one African nation stands tall, the others find their voice a little easier. And when the youth refuse silence, even the soldiers remember where they came from. Madagascar's uprising may fade from the headlines, but its echo will linger, a reminder that the wind has changed direction, and no empire can control a storm that starts in the hearts of the people. If you believe Africa is standing taller with every story like this, then don't just watch history, be part of it. Subscribe and explore our channel for more powerful Pan-African stories. From the Sahel to the Indian Ocean, from the struggle to the rise. Every video is another chapter in Africa's journey told by Africans, for Africans.